I framed a senator, orchestrated a prison break, and faked the death of my only ally, making myself the most wanted woman in America. Why? Because when the man who took everything from you thinks you're finally broken and alone, that's when he's vulnerable. My name is Eliza Vance, and the day my father's corporate empire was systematically dismantled, the man who handed the FBI the key evidence was my fiancé, Marcus Thorne. When they led my father away from our penthouse overlooking Central Park, Marcus adjusted his cufflinks and whispered to me, "It's just business, darling." The irony was richer than the billions he had just helped steal. My family, the Vances, who had built a media dynasty from the ground up, were now social pariahs, our assets frozen, our name dragged through every headline imaginable. I was left with nothing but a trust fund that wouldn't unlock for years and a burning need for something far more valuable than revenge: justice. They placed me and my younger sister under house arrest in a secure apartment downtown, a gilded cage. It was there, scrolling through encrypted forums on a burner phone, that I first heard the whispers about him. A ghost. A legend in the dark web known only as Rourke. The government had locked him away in a federal supermax facility, accusing him of being a cyber terrorist. But the people who knew, the ones hiding in the digital shadows, they said he was framed. Framed by the very same people who now owned my father's legacy, led by the man I was supposed to marry. A plan, insane and desperate, began to form in my mind. If you've ever had your world turned upside down by someone you trusted, just tap that like button for me, because you know exactly where this is heading. Marcus visited a week later. He strolled into the apartment as if he owned it, which, technically, he now did. He brought flowers, lilies, the kind my mother despised. He spoke of the future, our future, how he could protect me and my sister if I just played the part of the grieving, clueless heiress. "The board needs to see a united front," he'd said, his voice smooth as poison. "They need to see that the Vance family supports the new leadership." He wanted me to be his puppet, a beautiful, tragic face to legitimize his takeover. I could feel the rage coiling in my stomach, a venomous snake ready to strike. But my sister was in the next room, terrified and fragile. For her, I had to swallow the poison. I forced a tearful nod, letting him take my hand. I played the part of the broken woman, the fiancé who, despite the betrayal, was still clinging to the hope of a life with him. It was the most disgusting, soul-crushing performance of my life. But every feigned sob, every look of defeated acceptance, was a move on a chessboard he didn't even know we were playing. And I have to ask, what would you do in that moment? Would you fight, or would you fold? Let me know with a comment. Number 1 for fight, number 2 for fold. I had to fold, for now, because my fight wasn't going to be a reckless outburst. It was going to be cold, calculated, and absolute. The house arrest was a cage, but every cage has a lock, and every lock has a key. My key was information. While Marcus believed I was mourning my lost life, I was digging. My father, for all his faults, was paranoid. He had digital dead drops, encrypted servers, and financial backdoors hidden all over the world. He taught me how to find them. Night after night, fueled by black coffee and a thirst for payback, I pieced together the real story. It wasn't just a corporate takeover. It was a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of government finance. Marcus was just a pawn, albeit a handsomely rewarded one. The real players were shadowy figures who used his ambition to orchestrate the entire collapse. And deep within the data, I found the connection I was looking for, the evidence that exonerated Caleb Rourke. They hadn't just framed him for a cyber attack. They had used a piece of his own revolutionary code to do it, then locked him away to silence him forever. He was in ADX Florence, the most secure prison in the United States, a place they called the Alcatraz of the Rockies. Getting to him was impossible. Communicating with him was suicide. But he was my only shot. He held the power to burn their entire system to the ground, and I held the key to his freedom. The impossible just became necessary. Reaching a ghost in a concrete box required a different kind of currency, not money, but leverage. I spent weeks mapping the prison's digital infrastructure, looking for a crack. I found it in a junior IT technician, a man with a gambling problem and access to the internal messaging system. I didn't bribe him with money. I sent him an anonymous file containing evidence of his debt to a particularly ruthless loan shark, along with a simple offer: deliver a coded message for me, or this file goes public. It was a dirty move, but my hands were already stained. The message I sent to Rourke was simple, embedded in a seemingly routine system diagnostic file. Thorne and his backers used Project Daedalus to frame us both. I have the source code and proof of their back-channel transactions. You can burn them down. I can get you the fuel. Acknowledge receipt by crashing the West Wing's network server for precisely 3.14 seconds. The risk was immense. If they traced it, I'd be joining him in a cell. I waited for 48 agonizing hours, my heart pounding with every passing minute. Then, on the third day, the news ticker flashed an alert: a minor, unexplained power surge at ADX Florence. It was him. The ghost had answered. It's funny how life forces you into the most unlikely alliances. Wherever you're watching this from, just take a second to think. In your darkest hour, who would be your one desperate call? The escape wasn't a matter of brute force. It was a symphony of digital chaos. Over the next month, Rourke and I communicated through a series of increasingly clever dead drops in the prison system and the public internet. He was a maestro, and I was his orchestra, feeding him the schematics, security protocols, and financial data he needed. The plan was audacious. We wouldn't break him out. We would make the system release him. Using the proof I'd gathered, we began to surgically leak information that implicated a rival of Marcus's primary backer, a powerful senator. We fabricated a trail suggesting this senator was the true mastermind behind the cyber attack Rourke was blamed for. Simultaneously, I used my father's offshore accounts to anonymously fund a high-profile legal team to appeal Rourke's case, armed with the new evidence. The final move was Rourke's masterpiece. From inside the most secure prison on Earth, he executed a hack that made it appear as if the senator was attempting to digitally assassinate a Supreme Court justice to prevent the appeal. Panic erupted in Washington, D.C. The senator was disgraced overnight. To save face, the Department of Justice needed a win. They quietly overturned Rourke's conviction, citing a miscarriage of justice and pinning everything on their new scapegoat. The prison gates slid open. The ghost was free, and he was on a private jet to a remote airstrip in Wyoming, where I was waiting. The man who stepped off the jet was not what I expected. The media had painted Caleb Rourke as a wild-eyed anarchist. The man before me was calm, with an unnerving stillness and eyes that seemed to see right through you. He was leaner than in the old photos, hardened by years of confinement, but the intellect burned in his gaze. We were two strangers bound by a common enemy, standing on a windswept runway in the middle of nowhere. There were no pleasantries. "You're the Vance girl," he said, his voice raspy from disuse. "You took a hell of a risk." I handed him a satellite phone and a laptop. "So did you," I replied. "Welcome back to the world." Our new base of operations was a secluded ranch in Montana, a relic from my family's portfolio that Marcus's team had overlooked. It was a ghost on the grid, surrounded by miles of untamed wilderness. Here, we weren't a disgraced heiress and an escaped convict. We were architects of justice. For the first time since my father's arrest, I felt a flicker of something beyond rage, hope. But this was a different world from the corporate towers of New York. Here, survival wasn't about stock prices and board meetings. It was about grit, strategy, and trusting the one person who had as much to lose as I did. We were completely and utterly on our own. From our Montana sanctuary, the real war began. It was a war fought not with bullets, but with data streams and algorithms. Rourke was a phantom, moving through the digital world with terrifying grace. He showed me how to build an entirely new identity, how to layer proxies, and how to turn information into a weapon. While he fortified our digital fortress, I went on the offensive. I started by creating a small, independent financial news blog under a pseudonym. At first, I published insightful but harmless analyses of market trends, slowly building a reputation for accuracy. My audience grew, attracting investors, analysts, and even journalists from major outlets. They trusted my insights, never knowing they were coming from the supposedly clueless Eliza Vance. Then, I began to drop the bombs. I started with a subtle exposé on a minor subsidiary of Thorne's new empire, revealing a minor accounting fraud. It was just enough to rattle their stock, but not enough to trace back to me. The article went viral. Marcus and his board dismissed it as the work of a lucky blogger. They had no idea it was the first cut in a death by 1,000 cuts. The game was afoot, and I was writing the rules. For anyone out there trying to build something from nothing, whether it's a business, a project, or just a new life, share your story in the comments. Your resilience is an inspiration, and we all need to hear it. The next phase of the plan was to dismantle Marcus's network from the inside out. He had built his power on loyalty, bought with money and fear. We would use that same currency against him. Rourke identified the key players in Marcus's inner circle. A CFO with a hidden offshore gambling addiction, a head of security who was skimming millions, and a chief legal counsel having an affair with a rival's wife. One by one, we made anonymous contact. We didn't threaten them. We presented them with a choice. We sent the CFO a simple ledger showing we knew about his secret accounts, along with a one-time offer to wipe them clean in exchange for internal server access codes. To the head of security, we sent surveillance photos of his illicit cash handoffs, offering to erase the digital trail for copies of Marcus's private call logs. It was a masterclass in psychological warfare. We weren't just blackmailing them. We were offering them absolution, a way out of the traps they had set for themselves. Most of them folded within hours. Slowly, the walls of Marcus's fortress began to crumble, not from a frontal assault, but from the termites we had unleashed within. He was surrounded by smiling faces, never knowing that each one was now secretly reporting to us, feeding us the ammunition we needed for the final, devastating blow. The ultimate gambit required a level of risk that made everything we'd done so far feel like child's play. We needed to make it look like our side had been eliminated to lure Marcus into a false sense of security. Rourke devised the plan, what he called a digital ghost protocol. He would fake his own death. Using the access we'd gained, Rourke initiated a massive data transfer from Thorne's central servers to an offshore account linked to his old, now infamous hacker alias. The transfer was designed to be discovered. It was loud, flashy, and impossibly arrogant. As Thorne's security teams scrambled to react, Rourke triggered a feedback loop that overloaded the server farm's power grid, causing a localized explosion. In the chaos, he planted a pre-written digital forensics report, a masterpiece of misdirection, showing that he had been physically present at the server farm and was caught in the blast. The news reported that the notorious hacker Caleb Rourke had died in a fiery explosion while attempting the biggest data heist in corporate history. He was gone. My greatest asset, my only ally, was publicly declared dead. I was, for all intents and purposes, completely alone. Have you ever had to make a sacrifice so great it felt like you were losing a part of yourself? Sometimes the path forward requires letting go of the very thing that made you feel safe. With Rourke dead, Marcus became bolder, more reckless. He believed his last remaining threat was neutralized. He saw me not as a player, but as a loose end to be tied up. And that's exactly what I wanted. I left our Montana sanctuary and flew to Chicago, deliberately making myself visible. I used my real name to check into a hotel, a clear signal that I was out in the open. As expected, within a day, I was approached not by law enforcement, but by Marcus's private security. They weren't there to arrest me, they were there to deliver an offer. He wanted a meeting, face to face. He proposed a truce, a final settlement. He would unlock my trust fund and give me a generous pension to disappear forever. He wanted me to sign a legally binding NDA, a document that would not only silence me but also legitimize his claim to my father's assets. He saw it as his final victory, the taming of the last Vance. I agreed to meet him at his lawyer's office in a downtown skyscraper, a temple of corporate power. I walked into that building as Eliza Vance, the broken heiress, ready to surrender. But hidden in the lining of my purse was a small, encrypted drive. The performance of a lifetime was about to begin, and the entire world was the audience. I walked into the conference room on the 80th floor, the city sprawling beneath us. Marcus was there, flanked by a team of lawyers, smiling that smug, predatory smile. The cameras were rolling, a standard procedure for such a high-stakes negotiation, he explained. Perfect. He slid the documents across the polished mahogany table. Sign this, Eliza, and it's all over. You can go live your life. I picked up the pen, my hand trembling just enough to sell the act. I looked him in the eye, and for a moment, I let the mask slip, showing him a flicker of the broken girl he thought he'd created. I brought the pen to the paper, and then I paused. "There's just one thing, Marcus," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "The server farm explosion. It wasn't a heist." His smile faltered. I reached into my purse and placed the encrypted drive on the table. It was a message. At that exact moment, every screen in the room, the monitors, the lawyer's tablets, Marcus's phone flickered and changed. They were now all streaming a live feed. My feed. Because this wasn't a negotiation. It was a press conference. And it was being broadcast globally through every backdoor Rourke had ever built. If you were in my shoes, what would be the one sentence you'd say to the person who betrayed you, knowing the whole world was listening? Drop it in the comments below. The feed was live. Millions of people were watching. I looked directly into the main camera, a small device I'd hidden in a brooch. "My name is Eliza Vance," I began, my voice clear and steady. "And for the past 6 months, you have been told a lie." For the next 20 minutes, I laid it all bare. I presented the original, untampered source code from Project Daedalus. I showed the backchannel communications, the illegal stock trades, and the offshore accounts. I played Marcus's own call logs, where he conspired with his backers to frame my father and Rourke. Each piece of evidence was displayed on the screens around the room, irrefutable and damning. The lawyers were stunned into silence. Marcus's face went from pale to ashen. He lunged for the drive, but his own security detail, seeing the tide turn, held him back. The final piece of evidence I presented was a live audio feed from a bug Rourke had planted in the office of Marcus's main backer, the senator we had set up earlier. On the feed, the senator was in a full-blown panic, admitting everything to his chief of staff. It was a checkmate delivered on a global stage. The story wasn't just about corporate greed anymore. It was about the rot at the core of the system, exposed by a woman they had left for dead. My revenge wasn't quiet. It was a wildfire. The aftermath was a storm. The SEC, the DOJ, the IRS, every 3-letter agency in the country descended on what was left of my father's company. Marcus Thorne and his co-conspirators were arrested in that conference room, the live feed capturing their perp walk in glorious high definition. The senator was forced to resign in disgrace before federal marshals showed up at his door. The Vance name, once a synonym for scandal, was now attached to one of the biggest whistleblowing events in history. But in the midst of the chaos, there was one detail that bothered the authorities: me. I had admitted to evading house arrest and working with a known fugitive. I was a hero to the public, but a problem for the government. They couldn't imprison me without causing a public outcry, but they couldn't let me walk free. So they offered me a deal, the same kind they offered Marcus. Disappear. They would drop all charges, unfreeze my family's remaining legitimate assets, and in return, Eliza Vance would cease to exist. I was standing on the precipice of having everything back, but I would have to live in the shadows. Just then, a package arrived at my lawyer's office. Inside was a single, untraceable satellite phone. It rang. I answered. Rourke's voice was on the other end. "I hear Montana is nice this time of year," he said. "The board is clear. Your move." He gave me a choice: a quiet, comfortable life in the shadows, or an uncertain future on the board of our new game. Which would you choose? A or B? Let me know. I chose the uncertain future. A life in hiding, bought with silence, wasn't freedom. It was just a different kind of cage. I left the legal battles to the lawyers and took the first flight back to Wyoming. When I met Rourke at the ranch, something had shifted between us. The frantic energy of our mission had subsided, replaced by a quiet understanding. We were no longer just allies. We were survivors who had seen the worst in the world and the best in each other. He didn't grill me about my choice. He just nodded, as if he knew all along what I would do. "I was never angry that you used me," he said one evening, as we watched the sunset paint the mountains in hues of orange and purple. "I was angry because you thought you had to. You went back to New York alone, ready to sacrifice yourself. You never trusted that I would be there for you." I finally understood. His frustration wasn't about my methods. It was about my lack of faith in our partnership, in him. My whole life, trust was a liability, I admitted, my voice quiet. It was something people used against you. He looked at me, his gaze steady. Not anymore. In that moment, surrounded by the vast, silent wilderness, the war was finally over. Not the war against Marcus, but the one inside myself. I had spent so long being a strategist that I forgot how to be a partner. The world thinks Eliza Vance vanished, a ghost who exposed the corruption and then faded away. They're partly right. That version of me is gone. My father was eventually released, his name cleared, but he was a changed man, content to retire from the world of power and ambition. My sister went off to college, finally free from the shadow of our family's scandal. And me? I found a new purpose. Work and I didn't want to hide from the world. We wanted to fix it, our way. We pooled our resources, my remaining capital and his unparalleled technical skills, and founded a different kind of company. It's a ghost organization, operating from the shadows, dedicated to a single mission: digital justice. We are the ones who expose the next Marcus Thorne. We are the anonymous source that tips off journalists to government corruption. We give a voice to whistleblowers who are too afraid to speak up. We don't seek credit or fame. Our reward is knowing that because of us, some other family won't have their lives destroyed by the powerful and corrupt. It's not the life I was born into, but it's the one I chose. It's a life of purpose, built from the ashes of betrayal. I'm no longer just a Vance. I am a guardian, a silent protector in a world that desperately needs one. And for the first time, I am truly free. In the end, this whole journey wasn't just about getting revenge. It was about reclaiming my own story. For so long, I was defined by others: my father's daughter, Marcus's fiancé, a fallen heiress. Every move I made was a reaction to what someone else had done to me. The real victory wasn't seeing Marcus in handcuffs. It was the moment I realized I had the power to write my own ending, to choose my own values, my own purpose. True freedom isn't about having no constraints. It's about choosing your own. It's the freedom to decide who you trust, what you fight for, and who you want to become. My fight taught me that justice isn't always delivered in a courtroom. Sometimes, you have to build the tools to deliver it yourself. It taught me that strength isn't about never falling. It's about having the courage to get back up, to take the shattered pieces of your life and build something stronger, something better. It's a quiet strength, a resilient resolve that no one can ever take away from you. This is the lesson I wanted to share with you all today. Your life is your story. Don't ever let anyone else hold the pen. If this story resonated with you, if you believe in the power to write your own chapter no matter the circumstances, please hit that subscribe button and join our community. Because we all have a story worth telling and a fight worth fighting. Thank you for listening.